everyone. It is great to be here. I just wanted to start actually by saying there is still time, and our future, it's not written yet. And the subject of my talk this evening is how we can move from a place of climate anxiety and paralysis into one of skillful action on climate change. Now, climate anxiety is a truly global, cross-cutting issue. It is being experienced in diverse communities all across the world, but particularly within young people and in youth. And with climate anxiety, what can happen is it's this overwhelming sense of dread and fear from the future. And the tricky thing is that anxiety can be useful. It can implore us to act, but only if we don't get stuck there. And so it's critically important that we are equipping, especially young people, with the tools that they need to move through that climate anxiety so that they can start to take skillful action. And I'm not a psychoanalyst or psychologist, that's not my background, but what the research shows is that we actually, rather than pushing that anxiety away, we need to bring it closer and take a look at what's there in order to start to move through it. And I would be willing to bet that if you are a person who has experienced climate anxiety, that when you get a little bit curious about what's under there, that you're gonna find that you're somebody who cares very deeply about our human family and about our natural environment. And that means that you are exactly the type of person that we need to join us. So it's very important that we are doing this work. And so once you've done that emotional processing, you take another look, it's really important that the next step is that we actually extend beyond ourselves, start having discussions with our friends and neighbors about what's going on. And that's gonna help support you to come inside of that window of tolerance where you can act more skillfully. And one of the things that happens when people are feeling overwhelmed or uncertain about the future is that we want to reduce things down to make them simpler. And so that can result in a lot of black and white thinking or categorical thinking. And with climate change, as I said, there's still lots to be done. But we can turn on, social media for 5 minutes. You can see this all or nothing kind of sentiment really everywhere. And that's a pretty good sign that people are outside of their window of tolerance. And so say you're a person who has gone through this process and you've recognized, I'm having fear of the future, and you've looked deeper and, you've connected with others. You are now ready to, step out and take action. And here is where you might run into a whole new set of problems because it's a complicated thing, and I get asked truly all the time. Like, I want to take action, but what should I as an individual do? Great question. And the thing is that different actions, they work differently to facilitate change. And our job as sustainability communicators is to help people understand what types of actions can lead to what types of social and environmental outcomes. And for that, I would suggest really starting and taking a look at, what type of problem climate change even is. And then we can start designing solutions from that place. And so I'm going to take you through 4 things. There are more, but I have 10 minutes. And so these are things that we can use to help design those really effective climate solutions. And as I go through them, I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools that are kind of relevant for those different types of things. So the first is that climate change is a social problem. The second is that it is a very, very complicated problem. The third is that it is a collective problem. And the fourth is that it is a fundamentally systemic problem. And so when I say that climate change is a social problem, what that implies is that the benefits and impacts of climate change are distributed unequally across society. And so this is the place where everybody gets to feel really good about themselves when they leave, because when we look at responsibility, a lot of people are carrying around this like guilt, right? Like, can't afford to buy organic food or, take that action that I want to. But, the truth of it is like the billionaires and the fossil fuel companies, they hold a pretty unique responsibility when it comes to climate change. So when we think about like what tools would be helpful for that, that's where we need to bring in our really good equity lens, because we need to design solutions that do not replicate or exacerbate the social inequalities that exist across our planet today. So that's the first one. The second one is that climate change is a very complicated problem. Sometimes it's called a wicked problem because there's so much going on there. And what that means is that there's different drivers and impacts kind of emerging through all of our different actions. And it can be really hard to make sense of that. And so when it comes to tools, I think the best thing for dealing with that complexity is actually developing really good system thinking capacities, okay? That means not looking at things in isolation, looking at them in terms of their relationships, and then designing solutions from there. Which brings me to my third point. Climate change is not an individual problem. It is a collective problem, and thank goodness. This is actually such good news, because I cannot imagine what it would mean if solving climate change just like relied on my ability to like bring a bag to the grocery store. That would be so much worse than where we currently are. So with that, I find myself at my final point, which that climate change is a fundamentally systemic problem. It's something that emerges from our way of organizing society through our political systems, our economic systems, and our social systems. And what that means, you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, that's kind of vague though. So like taking a step back and looking at that globally, if you wanted to start with some important systems, 25% of our global emissions, those come from just burning fossil gas and coal. Another 25% is agriculture and land use change, and that would include like deforestation. So that's half of all our global emissions contained in those two systems. And then following that, there's industry, particularly coal and steel production, and then there's transportation, buildings, and then that last little 10% is actually still just how we extract and refine those fossil fuels. So if you're looking at a place to start, those would be really, really important. And so back to the tools that you need, because this is really about what we can do. So in order to make our individual actions truly matter for climate change, we need to leverage them as tools to communicate with the people around us, to invite them and inspire us to come and join what we're doing. And then the second piece is, as I mentioned, these are really, they're relational problems. And I think working in sustainability, starting that relationship, and really, really importantly, those collaboration skills, so that we can begin to step outside of working as an individual and work as a group. We're going to get much, much more done that way. So I'm going to leave you with this. I really like the analogy of you have a big boulder and you want to move that boulder down the hill. And what you need to do that is leverage. Okay, and so those collaboration skills, that equity lens, that ability to use your voice and communicate and inspire other people to join you, you're going to take those and you're going to use those as your leverage to move that boulder down the hill. That is the skill set for systems change. Thank you.